Well, hello, and welcome. I'm doing this little video for the @root async router, which, depending on whether or not my PR gets merged in, may also end up being express-promisify-router, because that's where I fork this from. But let's go ahead and dig right into the problem and solution that you are probably encountering. So the problem is that if you are using try catches in Express, you were doing it wrong, but I can't blame you because you didn't have a good solution, and the solutions that are out there just have weird, wonky things going on with them. So what you would like to do, probably intuitively, if you don't want to break the way Express already works, but you want something that feels like Express and that is just a drop-in replacement that will give you async await and promise support, you want something that looks like this. You want to be able to put an async in front of functions that you put in Express, and then you want to be able to do something like call your model for a database, have an await there, and if that throws, you want that to be caught by Express and not give you the unhandled exception rejection error or unhandled promise rejection error. You don't want that, right? And you want to maybe just be able to return and have whatever you return go to the user. I'm six of one, half a dozen of the other on this. I think that it's perhaps more clear to always call res.json on stuff rather than just returning it. But yeah, it's nice. It's convenient. It feels right for a promisified Express. So what you're seeing here is an app that is created from the Express router. So just like the Express app, but that is wrapped so that it allows for async functions and functions with promises. And for those of you that don't know, async functions are just syntax sugar for promises with functions, meaning that if we had, well, I'll show you an example later. We'll get into that in just a second. So, and this still works with the same way. This is a drop-in replacement. So you don't have to change anything. If you do have to change anything or if something doesn't work right, that's a bug. And you can file a bug up in, here in the issues, all the way up the top there. I don't know where the issues went. I guess I have to enable them. I will go enable them in just a minute so that you can file an issue with this because I want you to be able to do that. Anyway, error handling. Yeah, so if you do not have an error handler set up in Node, then you might be doing a lot of this try-catch stuff, or I mean in Express, you might be doing a lot of this try-catch stuff where you try something, you catch it, and then you handle the error, and then you do something else, you try, you catch, you handle the error. So you end up with a lot of duplicate error handling code, or maybe you end up writing your own res.error, or you have an error function that is somewhere in your code base that you require a lot and use in a lot of places to kind of pad out the error for you. So this is a way for you to, and you do need to have some level of custom functions to do proper error handling in the end anyway, because you want to be able to have error codes. You don't want to only have error strings like what was I showing here. This alone is probably not sufficient. You do want maybe your own custom error function that you can pass in a message and then maybe an error code or an error string that's specific to your application or whatever. Anyway, what I'm getting at here is that Express has error handler functions and they have a different signature, and that's why I forked this async router to basically just bug fix the missing support for particularly the error handler functions. You may not be familiar with this, but if you're going to use promises in Express, you definitely want to have one of these set up because you can attach it to either the main route. It needs to come last, but you can attach it to your main route here, or you can give it a prefix. So you could have a different error handler for /foo than you have from /. That's fine. But in your error handler, you can take a look at the error, probably log it out if it's an error that should have been handled somewhere else, and then give a more concise version of the error message out to the user. You probably don't want to give them everything that's in the error object because it might contain stuff that you didn't expect, that you shouldn't send across the wire. Things could be like somehow or another you could get maybe an account secret or a password or a credit card number, that kind of stuff that might end up inadvertently in an error message is what I mean. And the way that you use this, so you can see I've got app.use, app.get. So everything is wrapped just the way you'd expect it. But if you're not used to using express-router, if you've only used the express server, which is often called app, both the router and the server get called app, which is can be confusing because they're slightly different. The express server does have a router or app inside of it, but it has a couple of other things. So let me show you here. When you get down to the bottom, and what you'll want to do is you'll want to mount your router. So calling.use, we call this mounting, at the root of your express server. So when you call express and you invoke it, that gives you a server. Most people name that app. But in this case, we're going to call it what it is, which is server. And then you call .use, and then you give it the app. That's the main difference between the way that you would see any generic example of express and this one. So we're requiring express, that's normal. We're creating an app, but we're not creating it as an express server. We're creating it as an express router that's been wrapped with async handling. Got it? And then down here at the bottom, now I think it's really confusing when people use the .listen on the express server for a variety of reasons that I won't go into right now. But I recommend, yes, you can call the express server .listen. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me because you could instead call http.createserver.listen, and then you would be using the Node HTTP server, which if you're ever using WebSockets, you would need to have access to this object anyway. This object would not work. So that's just a kind of a pet peeve, pro tip of mine is to do that. Now let's go ahead and just do some live code here. So I'm going to create, I'm just going to call this app.js, and I'm going to do my use strict and let express equal require express. And then a lot of times you'd see this. We're not going to do it this way. Nope. That's not what we're doing. Instead, and then you'd also perhaps see it this way. These are the two common ways that you'll see it done. We're not going to do that. We're just replacing it. It's going to work exactly the same. If it doesn't work exactly the same, that's a bug. But we're going to use async-router dot router, just like that. Then when we want to say get hello, I'm kind of building out just what we saw, but we're just going to do it a little slower because sometimes it's easier to see code being built than it is just to see it all put together. We have here our rec and our res, or maybe our rec, res, and next. In this case, we don't actually need next, so that's fine. And we might say something like res.json and give it a message. We're going to put hello. This would be synchronous. If we want to make it asynchronous, we don't actually do anything different. But if we want to simulate it being truly asynchronous, I've got a little sleep function here in the README for the purposes of doing this demo. Oops. So this could be a database call. This could be a number of things. But we're just going to call await sleep. This is the exact same as if we had done it like this. It doesn't have to be an async function. For those of you that are more familiar with promises, exact same thing. It's just syntax sugar. Oh, except that if it was a promise, I'd need to have the dot then, of course. And then the dot then would need to have this inside of it like that. Sorry. So that's what it'd be like. So we're going back to, we've got the await sleep. And we pass in, let's say we want to sleep for 100 milliseconds to simulate a database call or something. And then we don't actually have to call res.json. We can. It's fine to do that. But we can also just return our message. That's acceptable. And then we can have an error. We're just going to throw in here. So throw new error. Life's hard. There we go. Then we get our HTTP server set up, http.create server. Oh, actually, sorry, first we'll get our express server, and we'll do .use and pass it in our app. So just slightly different from how you might usually do this, because we're going to call .use directly on the server, give it the app, and then we're going to pass the server, or the HTTP handler, however you want to call it, to create server, and then call .listen. So nothing too crazy here. Port 3000, and then console.info listening on, and then give it this .address. All right, so now I think we got our whole server set up here. I don't have the linter settings set up in this project, hence it's giving me a bunch of errors that it doesn't need to give me. So we can just ignore all those. They're not real errors. All right, with that set up, let's go ahead and run it. Oh, I need to install express and @root async-router. Got those installed. Okay, now we have our express app. And what we should have is we're going to have our default. Oops. Let's see what we get here. No, one less. Okay. I'm going to pull this up just a little bit. And I'm going to pull this up just a little bit so we can see all three here. So I'll go ahead and do curl http localhost 3000. We'll get hello. Comes back with hello. So we can see that that's working as expected. We can get error. And then it comes back with Express's default error handler. So what we could do instead is we can make our own. Whoops, what's going on here? How bizarre. I don't know why Node won't die right now. But I think it's fair to kill it. Oh, there it goes. Must have just been a hiccup. Ghost in the machine. Anyway, so we go here. We can set a default error handler. So I'll do use and then create a default error handler. Rec res next. We can console.error unexpected error. Console log the whole error, and then as far as what we give back, status code is equal to 500. That's internal server error. And then we could just hide we could give the message to the user, or we could hide the message from the user. I think it's definitely, we don't want to give the user the whole stack trace. So we don't want it to be doing what it was doing before. Okay, now that I've saved this, let me go ahead and run that again. And then let's go visit that API again. And there we are. So we get the error and life's hard. And then over in the console, we get it printed out. And then to show a little bit more here. That's so strange. I'm not really clear on why that's happening right now. The demo gods. Control C must somehow be captured by something. I don't know what it'd be captured by. But that's not the point of what we're doing here today. So I'm going to move right on from that. The point of what we're doing here is that we can also have, in addition to having a default error handler, we can also have a specific error handler. So this error handler would handle, let's say, expected errors. And then we might, generally expected errors are user errors. Now we could put in here, you went to a URL that you know you shouldn't have. Shame on you. There we go. So, oops, sorry. I put that in there, so now I have two error handlers, one that's specific to only /error. Error handlers must come after whatever they're being handled for. So if an error could be thrown the way that we read it from top to bottom, an error handler that is visually above something else, if we move this so that it is visually above these other routes, we know that that can't work. No matter whatever it matches, cannot work. Error handlers always have to go below. And I could have, it would be possible to, I could go like this, for example. This can work. I could have the error above and then the error handler below it. And then I could have hello, and hello wasn't going to match that error handler anyway, so it's okay. But it's really important to remember, because I've gotten tripped up by this and spent time debugging it and then just been like, oh, duh, error handler has to go below. Because a lot of middleware we put up above. Error handlers are not that way. And you can have error handlers in line as well. So we could also take this. Actually, I'll show this example first. Let me go ahead and comment this out. So we could put the error handler in line like this. That's acceptable. So I'll show how this works. Let me go ahead and run that. There we are. And again, I don't know what it's doing there. Or we can have the error handler out separately. There are nuanced differences. Typically, this is how you want to use it with an app.use. If you do want to use it directly in a get or a post, that's fine if you have like a one-off error handling, although it probably would make more sense to do that error handling right here. Like, for example, you could do this to handle errors. You don't need try catches. You don't have to do these big things where you indent bunches of code. You can, if it's an error that you can handle, you can just attach the catch onto the end of the promise. That'll work just fine. And then, let's see, was there anything else that we need to do? I think that's it. I think that covers it. Oh, did we actually show? Okay, there's the use error. Yep. So let me go ahead and show this. And there we are. You went to a URL that you shouldn't have. Shame on you. Alrighty. So hopefully that was helpful. If it was, go ahead and give this a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more of the tutorials and whatnot, check the links down in the doobly-doo for the live channel and the edited channel. And go ahead and click subscribe if you want to. So this was async-router. The reason we use it is because we want to use async functions or promise functions with Node, with Express and Node. It is API compatible with express-router. You do not have to refactor any of the code. It's drop-in. Supports promises, async await. JSON can be called automatically. That's kind of the gist of it. This usage example is just about everything that you can do. But if you want to be able to, for kind of testing and debugging, there's also the ability to wrap, or in some cases, you want to wrap an existing instance of a synchronous express router. You can do that like so. It will not change the existing routes when you wrap it. That's important to know. And then as far as license goes, this is MIT. And this is a fork of express-promisify-router. I want to make sure I give credit. And if the bug fix that I suggested lands in there, then maybe I'll just suggest you use that in the future. But I personally will be maintaining this one. So if there are any bugs, you can hit me up, and I will go ahead and turn on, let's see, options, features, issues. I will go ahead and turn on issues right now. So if we refresh, now you have the ability to open up an issue if you need to or want to. All right. With that all said, you have a wonderful night. Adios.